been talking about the crisis. Let's take a step back. 1983 until 2008, the American economy experiences a quarter of a century of nearly uninterrupted economic growth. Then, beginning in the autumn of 2008, trouble. What went wrong?
Well, actually, it started much earlier, and I think it was the housing boom, followed by the housing bust, which occurred in 2006.
2006, much
and
earlier.
so the reverberations of that is, there are people out there who had trillions of dollars invested in securities based upon mortgages, and when people stopped paying their mortgages, the value of the securities vanished into thin air.
So you do not argue that this was a financial crisis that spilled over into the real economy. You argue that it was a problem in the real economy, particularly the housing market,
Yes.
that started the problem in the financial sector.
Oh, absolutely. If people had kept paying their mortgages, the securities would have been good, and we would have all lived happily ever after. Now the problem is that the politicians made the mortgages more risky by changing the rules. In other words, at one time, mortgages were considered the safest investment. This is for the widows and orphans who need their money coming in regularly, and you put it into real estate. But the politicians decided that we must have more home ownership and more affordable housing. And so they began to prescribe rules. You had to lend money to people you wouldn't have lent to before. And of course, there was a reason they weren't lending to them before. And we discovered the hard way what that reason was, that they weren't likely to be able to pay them back.
Very profound question here, I think, anyway. Did what happened indicate, the housing market problem, did that indicate that markets, wonderful as they are, wonderful as you demonstrate over and over again in basic economics that free markets are, that they sometimes experience troubles, calamities even, that the markets are imperfect because they're rooted in human experience and we live in a fallen world? Or did it demonstrate that the government messed things up?
The government messed them up. After all, for a century, you never had this kind of crash in the real estate market. For centuries, people who did their life's work lending money for mortgages did that without the politicians interfering. Once the politicians started meddling, the results were what you could have predicted. It's what was predicted, in fact.
All right. Response to the crisis. The Federal Reserve floods the financial markets with liquidity, while first the Bush administration and then the Obama administration enact stimulus and bailout packages that now amount to, as best I can make it out, something like $3.6 trillion. Correct responses to the crisis? Did the government do the right thing?
No. Those are easy questions.
All right.
One of the painful things, you can call anything you want to call it. You can call it a stimulus. All the data indicated didn't stimulate anything except boondoggles across the country as politicians handed out money to all the special interests that they are interested in pleasing. But for example, when they dumped all this money in the banks, the idea was the banks would then pass that money on and more lending.
Right.
Lending went down. They dumped all this money into the businesses. The businesses reduced their investment. All kinds of money is piling up. There's record amounts of money piling up.
What about GM? Surely that's the one success story. Workers are still employed. GM is now a competitive company again. They're paying back billions to the American taxpayer.
Oh, this is the famous one where we guaranteed them and it didn't cost the taxpayers a dime.
Right.
Yes. It's like going to Las Vegas, and saying, I put my quarter in the machine and out came $100. Yes. Now put another quarter and see if you get another 100.
All right.
And put $1 million in there and see if you get $1 million back. We had the same thing with the savings and loan crisis a couple of decades ago. They said, we're back in the savings and loan industry, we're guaranteeing it, but it's not costing the taxpayers anything. Well, it's not until it fails, and then it costs the taxpayers.